Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this very special meeting of Eastern Area Planning Committee. My very last, I can say for sure, and I can say the same for Councillors Alan Law and Keith Woodhams, both stalwarts of Eastern Area Planning over many years. We're the ones who are definitely not standing. Of course, everyone else is at the whim of the electorate. There's a certain event happening next week, but I wish you all well. Anyway, let's crack on. I'm Graham Pass, Chairman of the committee for the last time. Other members of the committee present are Councillors Alan Law, Jeremy Cottam, my Vice Chairman Alan Macro, Ross McKinnon, Jeff Mays, Richard Somner and Keith Woodhams. The following officers are here to help and advise me. Lydia Mather, our team leader in development control, Michael Butler, Principal Planning Officer, who will present the item tonight. Sharon Armour, our Principal Lawyer, especially here to keep me on the straight and narrow in planning and governance. Paul Gareth Dowding. I shouldn't just read, should I? I should look around. Team Leader, Highways Development, Highways. Ben Ryan, our clerk, and Gordon Oliver, who is responsible for the technology as the Zoom host. Now, before we start proceedings, I'd like to explain that tonight's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present in the council chamber. It's being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Please can I ask everyone present in the chamber to make sure you switch on your microphones when invited to speak, and to speak reasonably close to them, and of course to switch them off when you've finished. I will guide those who are here to make their presentations to us how to use the technology at the appropriate time. Please make sure all your mobile phones are on silent and the sound turned off if you are using your tablets, which we are not routinely. Do members have any? Oh, no, if we hear the evacuation alarm this evening, you must leave the building immediately. Please proceed via the safe emergency exit route and follow any instructions given by the officers. The assembly point is the car park at the Dolphin Pub. So lockdown alarm sounds will remain seated and await instructions from officers and adjourn the meeting until it is safe to proceed. Do members have any questions? I'll skip over that because you never do. First of all, I will ask the clerk, do we have any apologies, please?
Yes, Chairman, we have received apologies from Councillor Tony Linden.
Thank you. Members, minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of March 2023. May I sign them as true and correct record? Is that proposed?
Proposed, Chairman.
Second, any comments? Oh, we do, right, okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. A couple different things. First of all, this is on application 21-03256, and item 3 on page 6. Mr. Gary Mars wasn't representing the parish council at that time. He will be on the parish council after the election, but he wasn't at that time, Mr. Chairman. He was an interested resident. And then on page 9, there's a couple of things. First of all, in my address to the committee, second paragraph, I shared the parish council concerns regarding the height of buildings and the density, which I didn't feel was appropriate for the age of the village, etc. Age does not make a lot of sense, Mr. Chairman. I think that should be character. And the 1, 2, 3, the fourth paragraph, at the last, the penultimate sentence, so there were particular spots along the bypass that were only monitored. Sound monitoring this is, in fact, there was one site along the bypass which was monitored 24 hours. The comment refers to the other spots or locations for monitoring. Okay.
I'm sure those points have been noted. With those alterations, I will sign them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, are you all happy with that? Quick show of hands. Thank you. Right. Members, declarations of interest. Councillor Mays.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have a declaration of interest because my son is involved with the applicant and I will be leaving the chamber and I will not be able to vote. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just clarify when you'll be leaving?
Now.
Now, straight away.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I've got some reading matter to do as well.
Well, it was good of you to turn up. Thank you. Right, now, members, I shall say this really for those here who have joined us to make their points. The way we do things is our planning officer will introduce the item. Then I will invite you in turn, that's the parish council representative, the applicant, and then the ward member who will be here on Zoom to make their points. When it is your turn, you will find the right-hand button of the microphone stand, the picture of a head and shoulders with little sound waves coming out. And if you press that, that's the microphone. You have up to 5 minutes, which is timed very strictly with my stopwatch. I will help you with any timekeeping, but please, after you've spoken, would you remain there for any questions that members may have? And then we enter debate and make a decision. So without further ado, application number 23-00072, Reserve Major, land south of Tower Gardens, Mortimer. Mr. Butler, please.
The application, Chairman, is a reserve matters application for a retaining wall in relation to the Mortimer NDP site. And apologies that we haven't got the screen sharing up yet. Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, could I kindly request the officer speak more closely to the microphone? So
Yeah, I was just about to make the point.
Thank you. I knew the technology might be a problem. Apologies. So this is the application site you can see here.
Still showing the wrong slide. It's showing
Apologies.
this one.
Yeah, it's apologies for this. We did do it before and it worked.
Why on your mouse not?
I'll carry on talking while we hopefully get the technology to work, because I have done quite a long visual presentation.
It's not showing on the right screen. Sorry.
That's okay.
You're right.
Yeah. I'll carry on anyway.
closely to the microphone if you could. Thank you.
The application seeks reserve matters approval for further landscaping details following the outline permission under 19981 out Madge, which was the outline permission for the whole of the site. The application specifically relates to phase 2B of the proposal, which already has received reserve matters approval, and it specifically relates to plots 51 to 58 and to the rear of those plots, to which the applicant is now proposing a fairly significant retaining structure. This retaining structure will be 192 metres in length. It will be curved. And for those of you who attended the site visit, thank you, we'll see that and hopefully we'll get the. Yeah, so this is the application site area in red. Here we go. So the area we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is this area here. And for those of you who went on the site visit, we were standing on the roadway about here, and then some of us moved down lower to the site to see the retaining structure there. Just to refresh your memories, and I should have said this first, and I apologise, the reason for the committee determination is because the ward member has called the application to committee should the parish council object to the application. And the parish council have indeed objected to the application. And hence we are considering it at planning committee tonight. The recommendation, incidentally, is to approve the application. So moving back to the retaining structure itself, as I mentioned, it will be 192 metres in length. It will vary in height between 2 and 5 metres across the horizontal line. And it will propose to be topped out by a 1.2 metre high vertical timber boarded fence. And that will be located to the rear of the gardens here, and these are the proposed dwellings. In the agenda sheet on page 22, you'll see the planning history. Just for those of you who may not be aware, to the west of this particular portion of the site, officers are currently considering an application for phase 3 of the reserve matters for 52 dwellings. And I mentioned that because that was talked about at the site visit. So in terms of the consultations, the parish council are pleased with some aspects of the development, but they are objecting, as I noted, to the retaining structure. There are no other objections at all from any statutory consultees. And the council has received one letter of objection from a local resident on the grounds of visual impact. In terms of planning policy, there are the normal planning policies in the core strategy, but I particularly draw your attention to policy SDB1 of the Stratfield-Morton Neighbourhood Development Plan. Just to remind you, this site was allocated under that NDP, and it's bullet point 5, which relates specifically to a smooth visual transition between this development and the public open space, which will be to the south of the application itself, the application site. In terms of the principal development, clearly the development is already approved under the original outline permission. In terms of character and appearance, this, I would say, is the main issue for members to consider. And on the screen there is a typical cross-section of the retaining wall as proposed. This clearly is the retaining structure here, timber and crib wall, up to 5 meters high in places, not quite on the vertical plane, but almost vertical. This is going to be the where the fencing is going to propose to be. And then the gardens to the rear of the dwellings will be terraced in order to achieve the necessary levels. And is perhaps better shown on the lower section you can see here. These are the dwellings. This is the roadway, the dwellings, the terrace gardens, and then the retaining wall here leading down to the public open space and beyond. So the principal issue in the officer's view is whether there is indeed a visual impact that is unacceptable or indeed acceptable in relation to this new retaining structure. As I noted, the rear gardens of the plots behind the proposed retaining wall are now to be terraced. It is proposed that if committee should choose to approve the application tonight, there will be conditions, in fact, to landscape the retaining structure and, of course, to ensure that the appropriate fencing materials are used. And before I go on to the planning balance and conclusion, I'll just take you through the slides for information. These were the original cross sections proposed at the outline stage, which were illustrative only. These sections here are what is now proposed, was proposed in the indicative outline. This is the area of phase 2B, and the perimeter wall is to the south of the white outlined area here. This, for information, is phase 3B to the west. There was a query at the site visit about how the public open space in this area was to be accessed by these properties here. And it will indeed be through this access here and this footway here. So there will be no footway access for obvious reasons from the retaining structure here. This, just for purely for information, I do stress this is not for consideration at committee tonight, but it was in following a question from the committee site visit. Would there be any retaining structures in phase 3? Yes, they are proposed. They are much smaller in extent, and officers are currently considering that application under delegated authority. Finally, for those of you who didn't make it, to the south of the application site, there is an open fields and a public footpath. I walked the footpath and took the photographs looking north, i.e. from the south, just to let members know what sort of visual impact the retaining structure may have. And in my professional opinion, in advising the committee, the retaining structure will have a degree of visual impact, but in fact, the existing houses already have a more significant visual impact than the retaining wall will, by definition of the levels involved. This is simply a photograph from the site from the east. Clearly, it's not completed yet, and the houses as existing are to the right of the screen, i.e. to the east. This is looking northwest. This is looking north, northwest again, and you can already see the nature of the levels that will be involved on the site. So finally, before I come to the planning balance and conclusion, Mr. Chairman, there was a query about future maintenance of the retaining wall. I will now refer to the update sheet on the future ongoing maintenance and management of that proposed retaining wall. Having taken further legal advice following the site visits, we consider the retaining wall is indeed site-specific infrastructure. It will require maintenance for a minimum of 60 years, on which is guaranteed. There's an annual inspection fee of £250. Therefore, we are seeking an index-linked sum of £15,000 to be granted to the council through a deed of variation to the existing section 106, which relates to the extant planning obligation, which will still flow through the original outline permission. Just for absolute clarity, in the existing section 106, because this follows on questions from the site visits, there will be a transfer of ownership from the developer to the council as public open space in due course. We are already receiving a significant commuted sum for that. But as this retaining wall will form part of that future public open space, the additional 15,000 will be added to that commuted sum. In terms of site levels, this was obviously raised at committee. In phase 2B, there was no specific levels condition. We are actually now proposing a specific levels condition should this reserved matters approval be granted, so that we can check the planning authority can retain control of those levels in the future. I've mentioned the access through the footpath from phase 3 in the public open space. So in terms of the updated recommendation, it is as set out in the agenda committee report, including the section 106, but we are looking to amend a condition topographic details as set out on the update sheet. And finally, last but not least, thanks to Councillor Macro, he noticed the typo, which we didn't. Condition 6 on the main agenda, the word until should be brought, inserted on the first line of that condition, and we will do that should the application be approved. Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And as always, members, if you do have questions, could we keep them, please, till after you turn your microphone off?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
If you could keep them, unless it's a pressing, urgent matter, I would rather.
Chairman, I'd let you rule on it. I am not clear on one or two of the shots that were presented. I'm confused, and it would help me greatly if I could ask a question of Mr. Butler now.
I'm happy for that to happen. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. It's the it's these, Michael. It's the comparison plans that you showed several slides back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you actually said here's the scene as existing, and then you said here's the proposed indicative. But on our papers, that proposed indicative relates to the outline planning of 17-03-004. You implied, I think you implied, and once more I want to clarify, the proposed indicative was after we have this new structure. But I could not see this new structure on these proposed indicative plans. Could you clarify what these are?
Yeah, I apologise. It wasn't clear. You're right, actually. Councillor
Thank you, Chairman.
Hitch, it's proposed indicative under the outline. Yeah, apologies. Yeah, not the new. Yeah, thank you. That's right.
If it's something immediately on clarity on.
It actually does say that actually in the on the heading, but I didn't make it clear, so I apologise for that.
Apology fully accepted, no problem at all. If it's an urgent thing on the presentation immediately, but I don't want questions to the planning officer until we've heard from those wishing to present. So Councillor Woodham.
It's quite an important point, Mr. Chairman. Page 26(8), full recommendation. It states here, in consultation with the chairman and vice chairman of the Western Area Planning Committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Well spotted. We obviously are the Eastern, and that will be amended, of course. Thank you. Right. Without further ado then, and any other questions we'll deal with before we enter debate, I would like to ask the Parish Council representative, Councillor Denisha Maudsley. You know the score. Can I help you with timekeeping?
I should be okay.
Jolly good. Okay, thank you. The time is yours.
Good evening. With respect, I'd like to first correct a statement made this evening that was also made at the site visit, that this application is about a retaining wall. It's not about a retaining wall, it's about a public open space. This wall and the steep slope that's now below it was not part of the original design or outline planning permission. This is an NDP site. Stratfield Mortimer undertook an NDP to allocate 110 houses. The inclusion of 3.35 hectares of public open space in the proposal by TA Fisher undoubtedly contributed to the choice by the village of this allocation. By the first planning application, the open space had shrunk 10% to 3 hectares. In February 2019, the outline permission showed the houses being built gradually lower as you move from north to south, and the main part of the open space sloping down further to the south of all the houses. The design included suds for which the pond was in the open space. The open space is described in the design and access statement as accessible and with a leisure trail. NDP members at the time had discussions with TA Fisher regarding the design of the open space, including planting to make it a wildlife haven while still accessible to the public. I met with the head of countryside at the time about future management. We discussed WBC adopting it for a year to complete snagging and the possibility of SMPC adopting it after that, with section 106 money passing with it. Excuse me. Some maintenance could be done by volunteers and incorporate SMPC organised events like haymaking on the slopes. 20/01697 gave the details for drainage and water. The SUD system was now designed differently, but all the levels shown still indicated smooth contours down the site. I believe that at this point there was a failure to predict the significant difference in levels that would now arise down the site. 21/02347 was the detailed design for 2A. This is the first time there's an indication of an abrupt change in the level at the boundary, but because that boundary was between 2B and the open space, it wasn't looked at by anybody and it wasn't shown as a wall. 22/01422 was the detailed design for phase 2B, the houses that go up to the boundary with the open space. This shows the same levels as phase 2A, and the boundary in question is now part of the application area. A simple post and rail fence at that point is shown dividing the gardens from the open space, although the site plan shows a steep gradient. And now we come to today's application for the open space, and the first time the wall is included. SMPC is very concerned by this application, and we had a site visit prior to the committee one. The application, to our opinion, is incomplete and shows the gradients and boundary treatments only for the eastern half. The western half below phase 3 only shows the planting. The wall with the 1.2 metre fence at the top will not blend into the countryside. It does not meet part of a site-specific NDP policy, which Mr. Butler has already quoted, so I won't read it to you again. Much less usable open space. There is now a non-publicly accessible maintenance path along the foot of the wall. So I inquired at the site visit, how are the public to be kept away from the wall? And I was told that the slope from the wall downwards now to the pond is so steep that nobody can walk up it. So there is no publicly accessible space left between the trail around the ponds and the houses in that eastern part of the site, which is a big loss of a proportion of the accessible open space there was supposed to be. We're concerned about safety. The wall proposed is from 3 to over 5 metres high. Netting is now being added to the bottom 2 metres and plants grown up it to hide it.
1 minute remaining.
To hide it and stop it, people climbing up it. But in our opinion, children will not keep away and it will be a temptation to try and climb. We have safety concerns for the houses above. Is a 1.2 metre fence above a 5 metre drop enough to stop your children or pets falling down? Or will the structural integrity of the wall be affected by permitted development, digging of foundation in rear gardens? In conclusion, the open space will be less attractive because of the wall and less usable, with a large percentage lost to access by the public because it is so steep. Rather than a beautiful green addition to the village, we're concerned this could become a white elephant, difficult to maintain and not as helpful, to the village as we expected. And certainly, as is presently shown, SNPC would not consider adopting it in the future.
Well,
thank you.
Timed that well. 3 seconds to go. Members, any questions for Councillor Maudsley, please? Are we going to let her off that lightly? It appears we are. Thank you very much indeed.
Chairman,
Councillor Law.
I was just trying to find the relevant piece of information about site levels before I ask my question. Councillor, would you like to comment on site levels, please?
Yes.
When we were there, if I could just frame the question a little bit. When we were there and we walked back towards the entrance, away from where the houses and the slope was going to be, and looking up, it appeared to be the land gradually rising up. And I think there was a comment made, oh, those levels are higher than they should have been. Would you like to expand on that or clarify that for me, please?
In my non-technical understanding, at the stage of the outline planning, we had gradually lower houses down the slope and then eventually the open space. And we knew that would be steepish, but not, because the natural land was like that. It was quite, it was steep at the bottom, not as steep as it's going to be now. So phase 1 was built, that was at the top of the site. And I think that was built where we expected. And as phase 2A has been built, and now as phase 2B is planned, my understanding is it's no longer as coming down as much as it was going to. And my understanding, and I'm sure somebody technical will correct me, that this is largely because when they did, as I tried to explain, when they did the detailed design for the SUD system, which originally was going to flow in open water down the middle of that sort of little gully down the middle, but they changed it completely to being all under the roads and only emerging at the western end and joining the sort of ponds at the bottom, that changed all the levels. It was quite a technical condition. And as a parish council, I don't think we understood it. So we didn't really, in fact, we've had to, early on in this whole site and all the applications, we've had to fight quite hard to be allowed to comment on some of the conditions. I know parish councils don't normally, but we said because it was a NDP site and many of the policies that we had written were only going to be met or not by things in the conditions. So we have tried to follow through on the conditions. We haven't always been sent them. I think of late it's been much better, but for a while we struggled with getting them in time and being able to comment. Anyway, we did not understand that moving the subs underneath the roads and things was going to cause these changes in levels further down the site. I think that's the point at where this all happened personally, but that's just my not very technical understanding. I think had all the calculations for further down been done at that time, it perhaps could have been discovered then and maybe something else could have been done. If that makes sense.
Yes, I think you've explained the complex situation very well.
Tried.
It just to be, it appeared to me, I think you're saying the same thing, if just confirming if I've got it right, that the levels that we saw were slightly higher than they were in all the original plans.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense as well. Yes. Any other questions? Thank you. Right, we have no objectors, no supporters. We have, I'm going to say the agent. I hope that's right. Yes, I'm getting a nod. Catherine Miles of Provision. Catherine, welcome. Same rules. Can I help you with timekeeping? Okay, and don't forget that little button on the right. The little red light will come around your. That's it.
Okay, good evening. Since we embarked on our planning journey for this site almost 10 years ago, we have engaged extensively with officers, the parish council, councillors and residents. Through preparation of the housing site allocations DPD, a requirement for 110 homes in Mortimer was set. This was to be met through a neighbourhood plan. In 2015, the community voted that the 110 homes should be allocated on this one site. You may wonder why this history is important for an application for a retaining wall. The village of Mortimer is located on a 90-metre contour. There was little exception to this, except at the avenue, which drops to 70 metres. The NDP examiner considered retaining the settlement pattern at 90 metres would contribute to the character of the settlement and its relationship with the surrounding landscape. In February 2017, a meeting was held between the council and ourselves to consider the importance of the 90-metre contour versus the delivery of 110 homes. Brian Little and Lydia Mather confirmed that notwithstanding the landscape impact, there were socio-economic benefits of delivering the 110 homes on this site. And officers confirmed that in the overall planning balance, the benefits of delivering a single site for housing, central to and well connected to the village, would outweigh the landscape harm. We made clear at that meeting that developing below the 90-metre contour would mean terracing in gardens. Officers commented that this could add interest to the scheme. We discussed planting, and officers commented that planting lower down the slopes would eventually grow to screen the development. After referendum in June 2017, the council had asked residents whether they wanted to adopt the NDP with this site. 88% of the turnout voted yes. The outline application for 110 homes was approved in February 2019. I pause here just to note that in approving outline permission, no levels condition was imposed. Subsequently, reserve matters approval for phases 1, 2A and 2B were granted, and conditions in relation to the road, landscaping, public open space and drainage were approved. In approving the phase 1 reserve matters, a levels condition was imposed, and so this established the finished floor level of the first 28 houses. Also, the council approved the open space and drainage basins, and that approval established a ground level at the base of the site. There were no levels conditions attached to the subsequent phases of 2A or 2B reserve matters permission, but the ground levels for this part of the site have been altered as part of the engineering requirements of the drainage strategy and to accord with other requirements such as road gradients confirmed in the agreed Section 106 agreement, Section 38 agreement. A retaining wall is necessary to the rear of plots 51 to 57 to address the level difference and to transition between the residential and landscape parts of the site. Essentially, this retaining wall is a result of the developing lower down the slopes, and the approved planting will grow to screen the wall in time. The wall will include anti-climb meshing, and whilst between 2 to 5 metres high, it is curved around the 7 properties it adjoins. There is no public vantage point where the entire wall could be seen given its curved nature. We agree with your officer's assessment that when viewed from the public right-of-way to the south, it will be the approved housing that will have a greater visual impact than the wall. In any event, the appearance of the wall will be softened with planting to reduce its impact from the open space. The CGI, which I note isn't there, but is useful in illustrating how the development will appear and integrate once complete. With regard to the Section 106, this should be straightforward deed of variation to the existing legal agreement to increase the maintenance sum payable for the open space once the wall is complete and transferred. The retaining wall is covered by a 60-year warranty and has been designed to be as maintenance-free as possible, other than the cost of an annual inspection fee of the structure carried out by a qualified engineer. This will be covered by T.A. Fisher. As such, there is no ongoing maintenance liability of the structure. Please remember that this construction is underway, and if issuing of this permission is delayed, it could have real consequences to the construction programme and potential for contractors to be laid off. It is unreasonable to hold the grant of planning permission until the deed of variation is complete. Given the construction programme, if such a condition is considered required, we ask you to consider this being dealt with via a deed of variation to secure the maintenance of the wall by condition
30
to be
seconds.
completed, thank you, within 3 months of the grant of permission. Also, in relation to the amended condition 3, plots 51 to 58 have already been approved without a levels condition under the phase 2B reserved matters. We consider it's unreasonable to retrospectively seek to impose this. Whilst the foundations for these dwellings have yet to be poured, the levels are already set by the road and require gradients such that it would be very difficult and costly now to change this. Also, the retaining wall does not extend around plot 58.
I have to ask you to conclude.
Okay, I just said it doesn't extend around plot 58, so if you do agree the condition, 58 should be changed to 57, but we'd rather revert back to the original condition in the original officer's report. Thank you.
Right, well, members, that's slightly technical, isn't it? Any questions, please? Yeah, Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just a general question, really. What happened from when the outline permission was granted, and we've seen the drawings there of the reasonably smooth levels going down all the way down the site, and we saw it a little bit earlier on, to today's application with this significant retaining wall. Like, what happened to change your plans, basically?
Okay, so the outline plans that were shown are illustrative plans, and they were not conditioned as part of the application, so they're not part of the approved plan pack. So with an outline application, it established the principle of the development, and in this case, the layout. At outline stage, you don't necessarily have all of the technical engineering drawings or the engineering work that was necessary. So in terms of discharging the drainage condition, and drainage was a very significant part of this site because of the slope, because of the requirement to have a level accessible open space area at the bottom that has determined like the lowest ground level, and the road level is where it is. There are requirements in terms of DDA compliance and gradient compliance for building houses. So it simply wasn't possible to build everything at a level like you might see at the avenue, which is quite a steep slope in places. The houses have had to be naturally built and the ground levels adjusted, and the result is the retaining wall.
Okay, thank you. And just one quick follow-up, if I may there, Chairman. You mentioned in your original submission that you feel it wouldn't be fair to retrospectively go back and insist on a levels condition. Given your answer to me just there, where the levels weren't considered at the outline planning permission, would you not agree that it is actually fair to consider this now? Otherwise, they wouldn't have been considered at all.
So levels could have been considered at outline. It's pretty abnormal, might I say, that to not have a levels condition on particularly on a site with a slope. But what I meant in that context was that in granting reserved matters, which is the detailed design for the scale, appearance, and the proportions of the house. So reserved matters for phase 1 had a levels condition, but reserved matters for the phase 2B and 2A houses did not have a levels condition. So those houses, that reserved matters detail has been approved. And the description of the development before you now, whilst it is a reserved matters, relates to the landscaping. It's not asking for approval for the scale of the houses, which have already been approved by the council. So for that reason, we find it unreasonable to as part of this permission for a retaining wall, to apply a condition that relates to houses which are not part of this proposal.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Chairman. I might come back to that during the debate, but thank you for the answer.
I'm going to claim Chairman's privilege. You didn't mention public open space, admittedly, but the Parish Council did. And in Councillor Mausley's presentation, she said it had been reduced from 3.6 to 3.35. Well, there was a reduction anyway, a small, very small reduction, well, 10% reduction. Would the formation of this retaining wall with, we are told, the steep incline to the base of it, does that impinge further on reducing the public open space?
No, so I think if you check the policy, I obviously don't have it in front of me, but I think if you check the policy of the NDP, it actually states three hectares of open space. And it was 3 hectares stated in the outline planning permission. And it is still 3 hectares of public open space. I think perhaps the point is it's in terms of usability. So perhaps the parish were envisaging that there would be more of a usable area of public open space. But the plans that we've submitted, whilst they didn't show the retaining wall, they always showed a landscaping, significant tree planting, a landscaping belt to the back of these properties. So in my view, that area wouldn't have been what I would have classed as usable public open space. So it's nice to walk around or nice to look at, but not usable. The usable bit is around the retained basin, and you'll see on the plans that there is still the level path, there is still that accessible path, that's all still there. The basins grew as a result of the engineering details for the drainage, but there is still 3 hectares in my view.
Well, that's helpful, and thank you. And I felt it was important to ask that. You have answered, and thank you. I'm grateful. Members, still on questions? Any further questions? Thank you. So, members, could you please advise when Councillor Bridgman is on Zoom, please? Thank you. Councillor Bridgman, can you hear us?
Chairman, I can indeed. Can you hear me?
And we hear you and now see you. You know the score. Up to 5 minutes. Can I help you with timekeeping?
I hope not, Chairman, but please shout if I get anywhere near my time. Chairman, let me start by, because I'm not in the room and am not a member on this occasion of the committee, by thanking you and the fellow retiring members for their service. I think you've done a sterling job, but no other members may say something in due course. Let me use up my time now. Chairman, just to clarify, yes, policy SDB4 of the Stratfield-Mortimer Neighbourhood Development Plan refers to a public open space of at least 3 hectares. Chairman, Michael said that this was a fairly significant development in terms of the height of the retaining wall. I think I tend to agree with him. You've heard about the expectation of a slope down through the site rather than this terracing effect. Now, Catherine referred to terracing being discussed between officers and the applicant or the applicant's agents prior to the neighbourhood development plan and indeed prior to the outline permission. Chairman, I think it is important that I read out the policy that Michael referred to. This is bullet point 5 of policy SDB1 of the Stratfield-Mortimer Neighbourhood Development Plan. Remind members, this is a planning policy. It reads, incorporate areas of usable, accessible open space, utilising the natural topography to create a soft edge to the residential development, I emphasise, with attractive views into and from the surrounding countryside. Both Michael and Catherine referred to views, and you saw photographs, I think, from a somewhat further afield across the way on, I think, from Drury Lane or paths close to Drury Lane, which is somewhat to the south of this site. I would suggest that one needs to consider the views from the public open space of this wall, which I remind members will be something approaching 5 metres in places with a further rear fence on top. I suggest, Chairman, that when the public considered where it would like housing to go in Mortimer, and it very strongly passed the neighbourhood development plan, it considered that slope, not a terrace. And the thought was that when you were in the public open space, you would be looking at the rear fences of the houses bordering the public open space, not a retaining wall. So I do think it is important that we consider how we have ended up here and how we have got from a gentle slope, a slope, perhaps not a gentle slope, but a slope within the original outline. And I accept that the outline designs were not part of the formal planning permission, but nevertheless, they were presented to the planning committee as indicative of what this site would look like when it was fully developed. And I think that's important. And we are in a very different position now. And I thought this was important that the committee considered and listened to the parish council as to thoughts on this sheer face, if I could put it like that. And I think Councillor McKinnon had a very valid question for the applicant. And I really leave it there, Chairman. I think you've heard me. You understand where I'm coming from. I really wanted to give the parish council voice here. I think I've achieved that, but I'm happy to take any questions that you have for me personally.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. All members, questions? Councillor Law.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Graham, this question perhaps should be better directed to Michael Butler, but I'd like your view on it as well. We heard that phase one, when it went to reserved matters after outline, did have a level, a sites level condition, but that phase two and A and B did not. Do you know why?
No, I don't. And then I think, Chairman, I would point out that the outline, I think, came before the committee. I'm not certain whether it did, because the outline was very much predicated on the neighbourhood development plan, which the community had voted for. And I'm not certain how many of these applications have ever seen the committee, because they haven't, you know, to the mind of the parish, been in accordance with the neighbourhood development plan that everyone voted. Well, I say everyone, most of the village voted for.
Well, I can confirm it was only the first one that I recall. I remember very vividly the site visit for the initial outline permission. I don't think we've been involved otherwise.
It may not be unusual, however, for
It's
these
not
sorts of things to just be delegated to officers. I just want to, Michael, you may tuck this one away. I'm just interested as to why we had site levels on one phase, but not on another.
Right. Other members, still members for the ward member? No? Councillor Bridgman, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Right. Now, members, before we enter any debate, Councillor Law has a question for Michael Butler, our planning officer. And of course, any other members who have questions for him also, this is your time. So, Councillor Law.
Well, that's the question is, during reserved matters being considered, phase one had a site level condition attached, but it never happened in phase two, as we've heard.
Yep.
Can you confirm that is the status? And can you maybe explain why there was, I'm not sure, was it a deliberate omission, an accidental omission, or what?
Well, you could say hindsight's a wonderful thing, Chairman, but there was actually a particular reason, as I recall. First of all, just to clarify, none of the reserved matters have come to committee. They were dealt with under delegated authority, but they weren't called in, and we've received far fewer than 10 objections, so delegated. Can you hear me all right?
Can you just speak a little closer, please?
Sorry. So the principal reason why 2A and 2B, and 2A, by the way, well, you haven't got the screen share, but is immediately to the north of 2B, was that as in the outline permission, by the time that these reserve matters were submitted, the levels and the detail of the principal access roads to serve 2A and 2B flowing in from phase one had largely been set through all the proposed Section 38 agreements for the adopted roads. So I considered, rightly or wrongly in my view, but I consider rightly in my professional opinion, that to then further impose a levels condition on the houses in relation to those, the particular roads then would be unnecessary because I was satisfied at the time. Again, hindsight's a wonderful thing. At that time, I suppose if I had realised, perhaps as the developer may or may not have realised, about the levels difference to the south of 2B and the need for the retaining structure, it would have been perhaps a good idea to submit the levels, but certainly they weren't attached to those consents. However, as you'll see from this committee report now, things do change, and we are now proposing a levels condition which we can apply to this reserve matters. And I would take issue with the planning agent that it's not retrospective as such, because it is a fresh permit in which they've elected to submit. So it is indeed open to the committee to now apply that levels condition. So I agree it's not perhaps an ideal situation, Chairman, but I hope I've answered the question reasonably.
Right, Councillor Law, come back.
Yes, thank you for that, Mike. Just clarify, we can attach a condition, a levels condition. How far? I was kind of reading this, it was kind of the levels of the back gardens, as opposed to probably the levels of phase two. So we could, in fact, if my understanding what you just said is correct, we could go back and attach level conditions to phase 2A and phase 2B.
No, not retrospectively to 2A and 2B, but because this is a fresh reserved matters permission, as I understand it, and I'm sure my legal colleague will correct me if I'm wrong, we can legitimately now attach a fresh levels condition to this new reserved matters application because it introduces the retaining structure, which is why we're here at the end of the day. So I would 99% sure say we can apply that levels condition.
Levels to what?
Yeah.
You just said you couldn't do it on levels 2B, for example. But
No, I
levels
said-
2B is the one you'd need to.
No, I said, sorry, perhaps you misunderstood me. And
I did too.
when phase 2B, the previous application, and I'll get the permission just for clarity, was permitted. Yeah, I realise that. Yeah. Just to absolutely clear, and if I've misunderstood the question, I apologise. But what I was saying was that under permission 220142 for 2B, and I'll have to double check, there was no levels condition applied to that. So we cannot retrospectively apply conditions to that reserved matters approval. However, we can legitimately apply, as suggested in the update sheet, a levels condition to this reserved matters.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to interject. I'm confused now. 2B has permission.
Yeah.
Granted under 220142.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
that's correct.
Right. Is that physically putting the houses in the positions on which they are indicated on the plan?
Yeah.
Right.
No.
But wouldn't that indicate the height as well or not?
It has, but they haven't been built yet. And if this committee wants to approve this application with a retaining structure, it is legitimate to apply a levels condition to those dwellings to the south of the road because they have not yet been constructed.
Chairman, so we could lower those houses
Yeah,
from the plan.
if you want to. Yeah, that's the whole point. That was that. If I can just, sorry, I won't get a bit too
but please carry on.
strenuous
We
in
need to
this.
bottom this out, so to speak.
The level of the road, and I'm sure Gareth would correct me if I'm wrong, has been agreed. But what hasn't been agreed through this application is the ultimate level of the retaining wall and the relationship of the level of the retaining wall to the road. Now, if committee wanted to see a smoother transition of levels between the road and on these plots to the retaining wall, by applying this levels condition, you can add additional controls. And legally, we can do that.
Right. I want to bring our team leader in because clearly Lydia has a point to make. But before I do, because I think she may wish to comment on what I'm about to say, and this is where, thank you to those who came on the site visit. It's always useful to see things on the ground, so to speak. And where we were standing, the road had, well, the hard base of the road had been built. Therefore, we know we can visualize the distance. And perhaps if you get the plan up again, thank you. The distance between that, I'm going to call it road base, if it is a road base, correct me if I'm wrong, and the edge of the site where this wall is proposed isn't that far. So there'd be a huge terracing in order to lower any houses, in my opinion. Does what I'm saying make sense? And could you please explain how we could possibly alter the level of it now, bearing in mind what has been approved and what has been indicated on the plan, what has been approved under that 2B 01422. Lydia, can you help, please?
I'll try, Chairman. So the drawing which is on the screen now, we are proposing condition 3 for topographical details of the levels for those specific plots, 51 to 57, I believe, to the south. So that is the levels condition we're looking to apply and the extent of it. Could you bring up the section drawing across with the two? Yeah, is that, and I think there's another drawing, right, that one, that has two plans, look, that one. My glasses, I'm afraid I can't read from the screen, but that drawing should show the existing and proposed levels. So where they're proposing the levels to be, we consider that a condition is justified for those matters. So they relate from where the road is. I appreciate that that's, as you say, the base has been constructed. So we're looking specifically at plots 51 to 57 between that internal road and the retaining wall down to the ponds. That's the area we're seeking to apply the condition. Does that?
Well, it does help. Michael, could you please put up the plan you first put up, the one with the white area showing the 2A and 2B, right, that one, yes. So the point I'm questioning you, not debating it, specifically in fairness to those objecting and of course the applicant, to say that think members need to be clear if I'm correct, and I'm seeking clarification. For example, if we were to grade the whole lot of that white area down a little bit as a compromise somewhere, something might be achievable. What we have got there, you're only looking at south of that horseshoe-shaped road, are we not, on this application? In other words, those, whatever you call it, 51 to 57 plots to the south of that horseshoe road. In which case, any deviation in height variation from what is being proposed would be, let's say, dramatic in terms of where those houses are put, and arguably could even render those houses impossible to be built. Is that a reasonable summary?
It is. What I'm not suggesting is through the levels, the conditions discharge, first of all, if you approve the application with this condition anyway. I'm certainly not suggesting that we would discharge a condition where the levels are so ridiculously low that A, they're not achievable, and B, it would reduce the need or not to have a retaining wall at all. That would be ridiculous, and you couldn't apply that condition at all because it would be, I would suggest, ultra vires anyway. What we are saying, and to give the committee and officers greater comfort if the application is approved, that we retain a level of control over the proposed levels. It is conceivable that, having looked at it in more detail, the proposed levels that's suggested in this application, we would say, yes, that is acceptable, carry on from there. But if we don't apply the condition, we have no control. It's okay.
Oh, I take that point entirely, but I have another question potentially. Let's see what Councillor Law wishes to build on that.
Yeah, it's not so much question. We're almost into debate here, but it's points of clarification, because I'm hearing a proposal, I'm hearing certain conditions, but I don't understand them. And two things I don't understand. I would like the officers to clarify. If you go back to that diagram that shows the slope, okay, it's very difficult to see, but there's a line. That's not the one. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, you see that it's the second one. There's one with the two. Go on the next, that one. Okay, so it's the bottom diagram, and you see phase 2B there. There's actually wording on the top. You just look at that house that's sitting on the cliff edge almost. If you look at that house, it actually says, there's an arrow point, and it says approved. It says approved ground line. So, and then there's another line below it, which the dotted line, which could be the one that you're saying we could go to that level. I don't understand that, because you just said to me at one time, there is no approved lines, there's no approved levels. Yet here is a diagram saying approved line. question one. Next question is almost one of principle, Mr. Chairman. If we were presented here with a 4-bedroomed house and we felt it wasn't appropriate, it was too big, and we wanted to make it 2, the officers were telling us we can't do that. We can't change what's there. We either say yes or no. So if we go to this dotted line approach, clearly this retaining wall doesn't need to be 15 meters or 5 meters, 15 feet, old money. It would be much less, but that's not what we're being asked to approve. We've been asked to approve a 5-meter wall. We're not being asked to say, can we adjust that to a 2-meter wall? So I'm confused we can even do this. I'm confused we're even considering this.
Well, we're not here to negotiate. We're here to decide on what is in front of us, of course, and in a reasonable, balanced way, which is what I am allowing this. And it is questioning. It isn't debate, in my humble opinion. And I'm looking to my legal officer, and you're not going to disagree with me.
No, I'm not going to disagree with you. But yeah, I mean, I can't give a legal opinion on it because I haven't seen the documents. So I'm sorry for giving you a lawyer's answer. But if you look to me to ask what's right, I haven't seen the documents. I don't know what was approved in the last reserved matters. So I'm, I would ask similar questions that Councillor Law was asking.
Yeah.
If I were to provide advice. So that's where I'm coming from.
Right. I've got no further comments, Chairman. I've given you my professional advice.
Okay, you have indeed, yes. I mean, we are where we are with this to a certain extent. In order for these houses to be built, there seems to be the need for this wall. You've heard the arguments for and against. Are there any other questions, members? Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a couple of questions. First of all, on the wall layout plan, which I think is called, there's a black line runs around behind the, well, I think it's black, colourblind, but am I right in thinking that's terracing?
Yes.
Okay. The other question I have is, I'm a bit confused as to what access there is now for the, or there would be if this goes ahead, for the public to actually access the public space, public open space.
Yeah, if I can just show you on this plan here. So if the application is approved, the access will be through this roadway here, down here, and then there's a footway here. Okay, so it'll be a bit of a distance. I mean, it's obviously not direct, but it will be a short walking distance down to this footway here. Okay, the other alternative access, which is much longer for those on the site visit, you would need to walk up here, back up to here, and then bring down the public existing definitive right of way to here, and then back into the public open space, which is obviously highly unlikely.
Thank you.
I'm going to build on that question. Forget the wall. If these houses were built on the slope, there wouldn't be access through their back gardens for it anyway, would there? Has there been a change in the public access to the public open space as you've just described?
I would have to check the plans, Chairman. To be honest, I don't know. I'd have to check. Apologies, I don't know the answer.
But it would be approximately where you've just indicated, because as I say, there was no intended public access through other people's back
Well,
gardens.
exactly so.
So that was the point I was rather cheekily trying to make. Yes, okay. Right, we're still on questions to officers. Councillor Somner.
Thank you, Chairman. Just clarity on the adoption of that open space, please. I thought I'd heard West Berks, and I also thought I'd heard Parish. So just clarity on that, please.
The clarity is I've checked the section 106, and it does stipulate in section 106 that there will be, once the public open space is completed, a transfer to the council. Nowhere in the section 106 does it say, and then it will be transferred to the parish council. My understanding is, speaking to colleagues and officers, although I haven't had confirmation of this, although I sought it from Countryside, is that there was an implicit understanding that in time, once the council had the public open space, if the parish then wanted to adopt it and take it over, we would not stand in their way. But of course, they would have the commuted sums, et cetera,
There was a precedent in my ward of just such a case, so it
Yes,
can happen, but
I've
initially
got-
to West Berkshire.
I've got the adverse precedents in mind where
Oh, all right.
where the land wasn't in a suitable state for us to adopt it as a local authority and chose not to. The parish
Yeah, okay.
therefore also walked away from it, as you would understand them to do. Thank you.
Right. Still on members, members, still on questions to officers, if you have any. It is slightly more complicated than it first appeared at first sight, isn't it? Which is why I've deliberately allowed questioning to carry on, because we have to make quite a very important decision, balancing all aspects, both for the applicant and of course those not so happy with it. So if there are no more questions, I'm looking for some brave soul to start the debate. As I'm famed for saying, someone has to.
Yeah.
Oh, go on, Councillor Law, then Councillor Mack.
No, I'll have a go at this because for debate, I think we all recognise this is a place we shouldn't be in, but we are where we are. This is my last planning committee meeting. I got to say, in all the years, it's probably the first one where I'm not clear what the officer is giving me to determine. I'm hearing. I've written this down. Why would I condition levels that I'm told I can do tonight if I'm not recommending a smaller retaining wall? So my own question of the debate is, and this is what I'm not sure about, and I need guidance from officers, and if I don't get guidance from officers, I'm going to go down a certain route. Can I actually recommend a smaller wall? That's a simple question. That's a yes or a no. Can I recommend a smaller wall?
A compromise wall. Officers, can you assist? I mean, I did say we're not here to negotiate, but there are mechanisms we can employ tonight in the interest of all, if they're reasonable, such as deferrals and so on. We'll just pause a moment while they put their thinking caps on.
No, you have to consider the application as it is presented before you. If you're not happy with it, you refuse it. If you're happy with it, but the retaining wall as submitted. So you need to either approve it or refuse it. At the risk of sounding pedantic, the levels condition I'm proposing on behalf of officers is the variation in levels between the edge of the back edge of the roadway and the retaining wall. Yes. That is what the area we're proposing, nothing else.
And I understand that, Chairman. And now if I go into the debate a little bit, as I repeat what I said, why would I want to even consider reducing these levels or altering these levels if it's kind of have no effect on the wall? So I'm on this. I think it's quite clear where we are on this, and you've got to decide whether we either approve or not approve. I'm really on the half of me was saying if I couldn't get a clear answer from officers, I was going to recommend that a deferral until they went and considered it. But I think what I've just heard from Michael is quite clear. It's the wall as it is, yes or no. So that confusion is gone now. I'm just confused about the levels thing, but anyway, that's different. Wall or no wall? I'm not decided yet. I'd like to hear some of my colleagues.
Yeah, I would too. I mean, there are, I'm going to say, business reasons for going one way, and there are other reasons for going the other way. Councillor Macro, then Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not at all happy about this application, Mr. Chairman, because whereas in the outline and in the NDP, they were talking about a gradual slope down, which I think everybody found acceptable. Now we're going to have this quite a large structure in place. So we're talking about a retaining wall up to 5 meters, on top of which there will be a 1.2 meter fence. And according to the site sections, the base of the houses would actually be visible above that fence. Although in the report it says that the view from the south would be dominated by the houses will now be a retaining wall with a fence on top and houses which will be higher than they were originally and closer to the viewer. So I'm not at all happy about this, Mr. Chairman. I'm not really very happy about the access to the open space either, because when we walked back from the site visit, there was a kind of a gully that ran up the side of the road that there wouldn't be access from, and I can see children and even adults scrambling down there making a desired path. So might not be a planning issue, but I think that's a very poor piece of design, shall I say. So I'm not at all happy, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, well, I'm going to ask Councillor McKinnon to enter the debate, and then I'm going to make a comment myself. I'm consider my role primarily, as always, is the smooth running of the committee to ensure timekeeping and fairness and so on and so forth. But I'm a member of the committee and I have an opinion too, but I will not express it. I will ask Councillor McKinnon for his, and then I will make a comment.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thanks to everyone who's spoken so far. We as a council encourage NDPs, right? And Stratfield Mortimer as a parish, I think they were the first one to do it. It was before my time. So we've devolved a certain amount of control of planning policy to the village, and it was approved overwhelmingly by referendum. I'm looking at the policy. Councillor Bridgen made the point that following the adoption of this NDP, this is now planning policy. And the section in there which talks about a soft edge to the development, utilising the natural topography, to me, this application as it stands is contrary to that policy. Contrary to planning policy. I'm actually asking for guidance. As you know, I'm not a very confident person usually, and I like to get guidance from more experienced members. Why I should vote in favour of something that looks to be clearly in breach of planning policy. I genuinely want to hear why I should do that. And it's clear to me that if we are not happy with that, the application, if we think it's not against policy, it's not for us to redesign the thing on the applicant's behalf. It's for us to say, no, you need to go away and think again. And I think that seems entirely appropriate.
Okay, thank you. I will encourage further debate. I'm going to make an observation, and as I did say earlier, and please don't misinterpret this, it was an important one to see actually on the site, on the ground. My understanding from what has been said so far is that a large element of the need or the alleged need of this wall was because of the SUDS need, the need for SUDS. I will come back to our planning officers to ask them whether I have got the right end of the stick or the wrong end of the stick after I say this, but I'm going to say it first. My understanding was that the need for, and we all need efficient SUDS, don't we, sustainable drainage. We're all aware of flooding issues, and it's vitally important that SUDS is done properly. If SUDS was a major factor contributing to this, then I do have a sympathy with the applicant, because they're going to build these houses safely. Would I wish to live in a house floating on infill? But that's a different matter. That's irrelevant. But I'm not being flippant. What I'm working around to is that, yes, the thought of a 5-metre wall, I understand all the concerns. I understand the impact, the perceived impact it would have, particularly on the public open space, which is an important part of this neighbourhood development plan. But there's going to be a lot of planting on this that will soften a lot of the impact, both fairly close up within the public open space and from further afield. And the trees do grow fairly quickly, and there will be other planting around it which would disguise it. I mean, why I'm saying it in that way is because, and I did ask our officers to dwell on that map, that plan with the white horseshoe on it, because there are certain things that are, well, the houses are being built to the north of this, and therefore, to put it bluntly, I think we're in danger if we refuse this, that 51 to 57 really couldn't realistically be built. And I think we could be in danger. And I'm seeking professional advice, be it legal or from planning officers. Would that mean that we're acting unreasonably? I'm putting it out there as a thought process, not definitively, but I actually have a sympathy for it, even though I'm not very keen on it, if that makes sense. So can anyone guide me? Have I got hold of the right end of the stick in terms of a large element of this change of level is down to the revised SUDS, which was important for the whole of the site, or not?
Yeah, first of all, I mean, I'm not a technical expert, but I do understand that through negotiations with the applicant on this, or on all the phases, that SUDS indeed has been a very important technical part of the application. And my understanding would be that with the reserve matters, because of the significant existing levels changes, in order to achieve the SUDS, the applicant has arrived at this position. I would also say, and this was an informing factor to my recommendation, which was on balance, perhaps I haven't stressed that, but it is on balance, that if the progress of this application was held up and indeed somehow some houses were not built, that in theory could affect the viability of the whole development in relation to the 40% affordable dwellings. And there may be some, I'm not saying this isn't a threat, but it can happen. There would then be some possible DOV to the existing Section 106 agreement in terms of the viability for delivery of affordable housing. And of course, if it delays the application, that will by necessity delay delivery of affordable housing. I know I'm sounding a bit like a developer now, but that's the balancing act I arrived at in my recommendation. I'm not resigning from the fact in recommending this application to committee and indeed to the parish council, as it were, that there will actually be a fairly significant visual impact. How harmful that will be, that's up to members to decide. And there will, of course, be an impact on the public open space. But balanced against that, the advice is whether the delivery of this very important site should be not stalled, but it will definitely be fairly significantly delayed. Thank you.
Well, okay, thank you. Well, I've expressed my opinion. Others have expressed theirs. Councillor Cottam, express yours, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. This is obviously a very complex site with a lot of problems. I do not see any reason why this should go ahead unless those problems are suitably addressed. I have some engineering experience, not in this particular area, but looking at it logically and analysing it, there isn't an answer on the table to solve this problem. And I don't think we should go ahead and approve this unless we are all completely satisfied, and I'm not, that there's a solution before us. I think it should not go ahead until we have actually got a list of solutions given to us that is understandable and that we're reassured will go ahead. I mean, you know, there are scenarios. I know when we were looking at that encampment in Woolhampton next to the railway, and I said, well, what about safety of the ground and shifting of the ground? As it happens, 6 months later, I think British Rail, Network Rail came back and said, oh, we're concerned about that. But nobody had looked at that then. And I'm getting that sinking sensation. Well, I read it, but there we go. Anyway, that's irrelevant to a certain extent, but it's just summing up my thought, why I am concerned. And I don't think we should go ahead on this basis because there are so many questions and it's about what is possible and what is not possible to do with this site. If you want clarification, Chairman, I'm very happy to, if you've got a question as to what I'm trying to get at.
I know what you're trying to get at. I mean, the issue with the one you described was there was no retaining wall. It was just infill thrown onto the ground and compacted not very well. So I think, yeah, with respect, I think it's a slight red herring, but I understand your point. This is to stop slippage and so on and to level the site. But
It's not just slippage, it's many other factors.
It is, yeah, right. So I'm just going to take personal advice from my planning officer. If you just bear with me for a few seconds. Which this is giving you the opportunity to members to enter debate in a second, if you wish. Right, members, any further debate or I'm looking for, Councillor Somner, I am then beginning to think I should need a recommendation. So, Councillor Somner.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to repeat what everybody else has been saying because I largely agree with it. It does, to me, feel like this issue has been created by design of the built out area. And it certainly doesn't appear to have helped the situation. And I note the updated recommendation 6 and the 3 topographical details to ensure the garden sizes of the approved plots meet the criteria. Well, that should have been, in my view, part of the design of the previous bit. And to suggest otherwise, I think is, well, I'll say it, out of order. And what I heard, I think several of the comments felt a little bit out of order. It's pushing the issue onto responsibility of others, where actually, to my mind, it's the design that has created it. You did, and I will repeat one bit that you rightly mentioned, which is the planting of the retaining wall. And I mentioned that because a family member not living in the area I was, so we were all subject to the building of a retaining wall right outside their front window, and it wasn't planted. It was hideous, absolutely hideous. This would appear to go some way to try and mitigate that, and I think that should be acknowledged. And the other thing to suggest, I suppose, was that if there were houses all across that bit, then it would have the same effect of a block change. This isn't easy, is it? Well, I think we're all going to come to a very difficult decision in a minute. And I'm certainly not going to be the one to make the recommendation at this stage. Sorry to disappoint you, Chairman.
Well, someone has to, but I'm not precluding debate. There are a couple of, well, one of you or two of you who haven't said too much. Or is someone brave enough to make a recommendation? Councillor Macro.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to suggest we refuse this application on the grounds of the visual impact from the south, and particularly from the public open space, which I think the parish council representative mentioned, and also because it's contrary to policies in the neighbourhood development plan.
Okay, I think that's fairly clear. Does that find a seconder?
Chairman, could I have clarification on the policies in the development plan that it's contrary to?
Could we be reminded? We have heard, I think, but could we be reminded of the policies?
My understanding is they have the same weight as the development plan. Yeah. So because they are part of the development plan, so we can certainly use them as reasons for refusal if you wish to.
I think Councillor Law wanted to know the specific policy. So the one about the soft.
SDB, it's in the report 5.
SDB 1. I think what it says, I think it's, can we read out what it says?
Tell me what it says.
I'll read it if you want, Chairman. I've got it in front of me.
I haven't got it.
Please do, Councillor McKinnon.
So this is the 5th bullet point to policy SDB 1. Incorporates areas of usable, accessible open space, utilising the natural topography to create a soft edge to the residential development with attractive views into and from the surrounding countryside.
Councillor Macro, that I take is what you meant.
It is indeed, Mr.
Spelt out. Right.
I'll second that if you're looking for a second.
Seconder. Any other points before I go to the vote? Refusal on the grounds that have been explained very carefully. Those in favour of refusing, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against? 1, 2 abstentions. I'm sorry, the item is refused. Right, members, the next meeting, having looked, oh, I don't think he is sat outside. If you could have a look, that would be. Oh, you believe he might be? Okay. Well, I thought he was, all right, okay. If he is, well, thank you. Pause for a minute. Well, I say a few words before, right. Oh, you found him. Well done. Well, I was assured you were. We have made a decision on that item. And well, I'm going to close the meeting very shortly, but I'm going to take the opportunity of publicly saying it's been a pleasure working with our planners and legal and highways teams over very many years. I've had lots of very good professional advice. They've kept me on the straight and narrow, an expression I've used before. And I'd also like to thank you and previous members of this committee. I'm conscious that he's gone now. I don't know where he's gone, but there are two previous committee chairmen. Councillor Woodham's chaired this committee for some time. Councillor Law has, and indeed various other people have in the past. But it's always been a pleasure to be a part of Eastern Area Planning. I think not everyone will say we do a good job, but I like to think we do a fair job and a reasonable job, a job driven by policy, guided very much by our planning officers, who we don't always see eye to eye with, tonight being a prime example. But they've always given very good and sound advice. And it's been a very great pleasure to me over, on and off, mostly 36 years, working with you and your predecessors. Indeed, Michael Butler for most of that time, and certainly Dave Pearson, who will be retiring very soon for 35 of those 36. So I just wanted that to be on the public record, that this is, to me, one of the most, I'm going to say pleasurable. One of the parts that I have certainly enjoyed most is working with the planning department and the highways department, and indeed, not to be left out, the legal department, for keep making these meetings go very, very well. And that's the one bit I will miss standing down next week. So with that, thank you indeed.
Could I just reiterate on behalf of officers, I think you've been an excellent chairman, and I have been for about 33 years as an officer, so on and off Eastern area. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Right. Oh, Councillor Macro.
As someone who's served on this committee, I think for 22 years, no one knows as long as you, Mr. Chairman, and also being a chair a bit for a short period of time, may express my appreciation of your membership of this committee and of your chairmanship, and also for Alan and for Keith, who's disappeared for the time. Keith, I think, was the chair when I first started getting involved in these things in the early 1990s. So, thank you.
Right. Councillor Law.
I just I'm not going to repeat other than say, I totally agree with what you said. Your sentiments are shared by me. Most enjoyable. This is the most enjoyable part of being a councillor, frankly.
Yeah. However difficult it can be on occasion. With that, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you, everybody. Could you just please remain seated till the